Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. My name is Lee Davey. I'm not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I'm someone that doesn't drink alcohol. And I help people do the same every waking moment of my life. And today, helping me do that is Nona Jordan. How you doing, Nona?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, Lee.
I've never spoken to a Nona before.
Well, now you have.
Where does that name come from?
You know what? It was my great-grandmother's name. So it's a family name, and I don't know exactly where it came from origins-wise, but my grandmothers were arguing about whose name I was going to get. And so my parents just skipped it and went to my great-grandmother.
Well, I like it anyway. I like different names. You know, I live in a world where everybody's called David. When I first moved to Wales, right? If you ever go to Wales, by the way, everybody's called David because the patron saint of Wales is David. But they don't call you David. They shorten it to Di. So everybody's called Di. So if your name is David Stacey, your name is Di Stacey. If your name is David Ridge, it's Di Ridge. So when I first moved there, everybody was called Di something. And I was like, this is a weird place. You know? Weird. Don't call your kid David if you live in Wales. Right. We're going to start with a random question. We can get to know a little bit about you. I don't believe in these icebreakers, making it simple, Nona. I like to get right into the heart of stuff. So I'm going to offer you 5 categories, and then you can choose from one of those 5 categories, and I'll pull a question from there. Okay.
Okay.
Now let's say this is a poker game. So I will give you the opportunity to fold twice. All right. But on the third time, you've got to answer it. Even it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes you feel. But you can twice. Right. So you've got a choice of career, sex, relationships, family, or money.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to go now. Do you want me to pick multiple or just one?
Just one. We might read some more later on, but just pick one. Career, sex, relationships, family, or money. I'm
going to go with career. Career for 300.
Career for 300. That's so In your most depressed moods, what do you tell yourself about your career?
In my most depressed moods, well, here's how I know I'm in a depressed mood about my career. When I start looking for jobs on LinkedIn. So a lot of times I don't even know I'm feeling depressed about my career until I notice that I am scanning for jobs on some monster board or whatever. And so I think what happens for me, because we've moved a lot and my career tends to sort of expand or contract depending on what's happening with my husband's career because he's a diplomat. And so I will get I'm never going to get my chance. I'm never going to get to really devote my time to what I want to do. So that I think is probably what comes up for me. And I should just drop it and go work for someone else. But I'm not fit for that anymore. I can't do it.
Well, thank you for sharing what goes on in your head, which is an important starting point to this conversation, I guess, because you've got a situation there whereby your husband has a very important position and you have to travel around a lot. So it's almost like you have to, in a way, adapt to his calendar. And I know when that happens in my household, boy, oh boy, does that make Liza, does that put her in a spin? And it brings up a lot of issues for Liza, you know, in terms of what am I doing? Why I can't do my goals. This guy seems to be in charge. I'm losing my power to him. And then I become codependent on him. And I kind of like that a little bit, but then I hate myself for it. But these are the things that are going to go on in all the minds of the people watching this. It could be women or men who are in a similar situation. So do you see this a lot in your work?
I do, not in exactly the same way that it manifests itself for me because we move all the time and, so it's a little bit different. But yes, I often see people who are basically a lot of their desires for what they want to do in their work is subsumed by their perceived obligations to other people's schedules or kids or aging parents, or, whatever it is, also important things. But the question becomes, but what about me? What about what I want to do? What about my goals? So yeah, I mean, what Liza is talking about, it's a thing. It's a real thing.
So how do we deal with that then? What kind of advice, or like, how do we help? I mean, the archetype here is the woman who left university with all the dreams in the world to, I don't know, go and look after gorillas in the Congo. And then she marries this guy, super successful, which she wants to do anyway. But then suddenly she has 10 kids and she becomes a mum. And because of that, she develops all these wonderful skills and traits around motherhood, but it detracts from the other things that she wanted to do in life. And then she starts drinking because she kind of feels lost and she doesn't know what to do. So how can we help these people?
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important question. I want to back up a little bit and just speak to the context of that, because I think it's important. Because most of the time we think of that as being a very individual problem, right? I mean, we think, oh, I'm failing, or, this person is failing. And so they turn to a substance or an activity to help them sort of numb that pain. But the thing is that if we look at the bigger picture, actually marriage and family is terrible for women who want to pursue excellence in their work in many cases. In fact, when you look at research into creative eminence, men are like 80% of all like Nobel Prize winners, people who reach a level of eminence, CEOs, CFOs, the prevalence of women at that level of what I would call creative eminence is pretty low. And actually there's no reason for that, because if you test women and men for creativity and intelligence, when they're young, women often come out above men at that age. But then what happens is that when the pressures, those expectations, societal expectations about being a mother, about taking care of other people, prioritizing other people's needs and desires above your own, when that starts to sort of take over, then men really shoot ahead. And this is societal. So I think that I say that because I think people think it's a personal failing, when actually it's a system-wide issue. And I think knowing that can introduce some compassion for the individual, like, okay, it's not just me. Okay, this is actually a system that is set up to not propel me forward, And so I think that it's not a blame game. It's just, okay, first of all, it's not a personal failing. It is something that is just, it happens in our society. And so I think we have some choices to make, right? And a lot of the work I do is actually helping women to rediscover that sense of autonomy and to make some difficult choices about how they want to be spending their time and what really is the priority. Because it just, men do tend to have less external pressure and societal obligations as far as family and marriage and prioritizing their husbands. And, those are things that are societally driven. And so it behooves women to kind of think about what's really important to them. What is the most important thing? And to learn to make those decisions and to have those hard conversations with the people in their lives so they can carve out that space for what they want to be doing.
I was listening to I listen to Sam Harris podcast a lot, and he always cites a study. I don't know the details of it, but he cites a study that in areas of the world where women are given a real distinct advantage over other areas of the world, say third world countries or whatever, that the women with the advantages fall into the stereotypes of being a stay-at-home mom more than the women who don't have the advantages. So that gets me thinking about Robert Fritz's path of least resistance and how a human being, let me give you an example actually. We was at dinner the other day, and Liza said to her niece, who is around, I don't know, like maybe 13, 14, right? She said to her niece something, I can't remember, I'm paraphrasing it, but she said something around the lines of, like something about meeting a successful guy when you're older or something. It was just like, just having chit chat. And she turned around and says, well, how about I graduate from school, I get myself a fantastic job, and I look after myself and buy myself nice things. And we were like, whoa, imagine having that kind of get up and go as a young girl when you're older. And then there was a part of me that thought, well, society is going to knock the shit out of that out of you. You know what I mean? It was like, you're going to have to be one strong-willed teenager to get through everything that society's throwing at you, for you not to one day give up fighting because it's comfortable where you are and what you know. And then the next thing you know, 50 years have gone by and you're in the same boat. So like, how do we get people to even realize that they're stuck?
Are you talking about adults?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think, how do we get people to realize they're stuck? I mean, I think a lot of people, and I'm guessing a lot of the people who come into your program, I mean, when you're drinking or when you are engaging in self-destructive behaviors that no longer feel good or that are ruining parts of your life, I mean, that is the clear clarion call, like something is wrong, right? Because I think most people really do self-medicate with alcohol or other substances or activities because they are deeply unhappy with parts of their lives and how they are moving through the world. So, I mean, I think that if you can, when people are engaging in activities that are hurting them and that they don't enjoy, that's a good time to say, okay, so what's going on here? Where are you stuck? Like, what are you really trying to medicate?
Yeah, I mean, what happens with Strive actually is people come knowing they've got a problem, looking for help, but it's not until they spend some time going through the program that they go, holy shit, like I'm not really thinking right here. Like, you know, when you start to ask somebody, what are your values? What are your beliefs? What are the paradigms that are running through your mind that run your life? And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, how did I get here? But then the hard work starts then, because, you know, you're stuck in a 30-year relationship. It ain't working. The guy's not listening. He's not providing you with support. He doesn't see you. He's not connected to you. Your kids are about to leave and you're not financially dependent. You're dependent on this guy. And you're like, whoa, what do I do now? And I guess that's where the internet comes in, and people like me and you become important, because we can offer a wing to climb under, right?
Right. Yeah. And somebody to walk that path, because you're absolutely right. You know, the drinking or the whatever it is that they're engaging in, that's a symptom. It's not the real problem, right? I mean, there are all these other things that are underneath that have to be addressed once you get rid of that piece. So absolutely.
Now, you stopped drinking 17 years ago, right? So
I did.
Woo-hoo! Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Why did you stop drinking? Because not most people don't. So why did you stop?
Well, I grew up with alcoholic parents. And so I firsthand really understood the destructive nature of drinking on not only them as individuals, but on jobs and families and households and all that kind of stuff. They both actually went to AA when I was 12. And my dad no longer attends AA, but he has been a person who doesn't drink since then. And he's 77 now. So it's been a long time. I think he was 39 or 40 when he stopped drinking. And my mom went out and drank again. But the upshot of it is that when I was 18, I moved out. And well, actually my parents kicked me out because I was drinking, and they were like, nope, you can't live in our house if you're going to drink. And I moved out and I failed miserably. And and they wouldn't let me come home unless I went to AA. So I went to AA for 5 years. I know this is a very long story, but I went to AA for 5 years and really felt I did. In retrospect, after I stopped going to AA, I was like, wow, that is not a model I really believe in. Like, I just fundamentally, I could not get behind it. And I started drinking again, and I drank until my late 20s. And one night I was sitting at my kitchen table, and this was not an unusual circumstance. I was smoking and drinking and reading a Pema Chodron book. Do you know who Pema Chodron is?
Yeah, I do. One of the most zen people you can come across.
Yes, exactly. And for whatever reason, this particular night, I couldn't get drunk. God, it was awful. I still remember it. Like, I'm like, I just, it wasn't working. And I looked up and I literally was given a vision. And it was like the Grand Canyon. And this voice was like, you are over here and you are supposed to be over there. And what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing with your life? And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? And so the next day I went into work and a girl handed me the card for her therapist. Weird. Mm-hmm. And she was like, this is my Buddhist therapist and I think you'd really like her. And I was like, okay. And I made an appointment and I was like, well, if I'm going to go to therapy, I need to stop drinking. And I haven't had any alcohol since.
But how did you can swear, by the way, it's fine.
Okay.
I did read my reviews the other day and someone gave me a 2-star review and said, I couldn't listen to him because he kept saying the word fuck all the time. So if you're listening to this and you don't like the word fuck, stop listening because I fucking say it all the time. Anyway, how did you stop? Because obviously there's lots of different ways that people can do it. They can just they go cold turkey, go to AA.
That's what I did. I just stopped.
Cold turkey?
I just stopped and it was awful. I mean,
I was going to say, what are the challenges there around like just stopping like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I stopped drinking the day before I went to my therapist. So by the time I got to her office, I was like shaking. And I mean, it was awful. It was terrible. But I also knew, like, because of that vision, I honestly cannot even explain to you, like, it was like I was given some kind of fortitude or clarity that was just like, you have to stop this because you are on the wrong path. And that gave me a lot of strength because what came after that first therapy session and once the alcohol was gone truly sucked for I felt like I was running through waist deep tar, emotionally and cleaning up financial messes and figuring out relationship bullshit. And, do I even want to be doing what I'm doing at work? And, it's like everything is up for grabs, right? Is this really the life I want to be living? What am I doing here? So between therapy and a very small group of women who I told I was not going to drink, I just stopped.
So how did you deal with the triggers then? Let me give you an example. Kim on Strive at the moment, she's doing fantastic work, right? She's working with all our Strive coaches. She's going through her triggers meticulously and she's hardly drinking now. She's really kind of nailing it. But the other day she gets into a big fight with her husband and she's been in that spot for a while. And then she's in the grocery store and she wants to go and get herself a bottle of wine because she wants to get rid of that pain. And it's only because her daughter was with her that stopped her from doing it. Otherwise, she would have done it. She said the trigger was so quick. I would have been there in my car drinking it, right? How did you deal with those moments if you were just white knuckling it?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I really felt like I was given some kind of fortitude that I don't know where it came from, to be honest, because I have had those moments subsequently with, in particular, sugar. And I know that's not anything as bad, but I've had those moments where I'm like, why am I now eating my 5th cupcake? What just happened? So I understand that. And so what I can say from that perspective is, a regular practice of checking in with my feelings. Because I think one thing that people who have had alcohol issues, we're skilled at not paying attention to our feelings until they're so big that the only option seems to numb them. Right. And so I have found a regular practice of compassionately witnessing and being with my feelings, like literally 4 or 5 times a day. Like, how am I feeling? Like, and it seems so simple and so ridiculous, but it is the only way that I've found that helps me stop in those moments when that happens with me with sugar. When I was white knuckling it, I was literally white knuckling it. I mean, it was like, you know.
It sounds like that curiosity is really important, you know. So like for me, for example, I like if I was to get really super sad right now in a conversation with you, which happens like regularly on the podcast, I don't want to run away from that. I love it. Like I embrace it. I like all my different feelings. I like being angry. Otherwise I wouldn't be angry. I like being sad when I'm sad because I like the inquisitiveness of like, oh, wow, what prompted that? What's going on? So I think developing a sense of curiosity about how the human mind works and, you know, psychologically and biologically is like super important. It also sounds like you had a good support system, that you was able to go to a circle of friends who I'm assuming here, because of just a little bit what you said, they're not going to try to force you to drink, which is really helpful.
Right.
You know?
Right. And my parents were also not drinking at the time. So from a family perspective, I actually had more support from my family once I stopped drinking, because I was kind of avoiding them and staying away and not telling the truth, and that takes a lot of energy.
And there was no partner at this time?
I had a boyfriend, but I ended up breaking up with him shortly after I stopped drinking.
Dude, if you're listening to this, you want to give up drinking, ditch the partner.
You've got to. I mean, I think you have to, right?
It's so much easier to stop drinking alcohol when there's not another person in your house drinking alcohol, right? It's like so much easier. So much easier.
Totally.
Okay, so you gave up drinking 17 years ago. Today, you are helping females to change their lives. Describe how you see the world and the females' role in it and the challenges that females are facing today. Oh, let me just tell you something. As a man, I don't even know in this day and age if I should say female, woman, lady. I haven't got a clue. I think I'm going to get in trouble no matter which term I use. That is the state of the world that I think we're living in.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, it's like, well, what do you want to be called? What's going on? So, I think that women have so much to offer, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of women in the Western world, who oddly enough, like have so much privilege and so much availability that we can get. We are educated, we have access to money, we have access to entrepreneurship, we can get jobs. We have so much power, really. Like we have so much power. And what I see so often is a profound sense of not having power. And what I mean by that is not feeling choiceful, right? Not feeling autonomous in being able to make a choice and act on it. And so, like, for instance, like, can you imagine what would happen if all the women who are completely incensed about how children are being treated at the border, let's just say, I'm not in the United States right now, so I'm just going to say, let's say that a huge mass of women got really upset about that. What would happen? Like, it's 51% of our population is women, but boy, you'd never guess it, given the way that we turn out to vote or turn up in politics or turn up at town hall meetings. I just think that if women actually understood, like, I'm equal, I'm powerful, I have a voice, I have a say, that it would completely change the world. Like, I think climate change would probably, be on the reverse. I think that a lot of things would be different. I think human rights would be more of an elevated topic. I just think that women, and I'm not dissing men, because I think that we need masculine energy. We need it, right? But the mistake, I think, of what I would say patriarchal society, and sort of the society that has created women who feel like they're obligated to everybody else's needs before their own, thoughts and desires. What that has done is it set up a very imbalanced society. And I think we're really at the beginning of a golden age for women. Just like that, your niece, my daughter's like that too. She's going to be 15 and she's just like, please, whatever. I don't want kids. I've got work to do. And so I think there is a swell of female energy that's going to come. And I don't think that means male energy needs to go away, but I think there's a real role for compassion and empathy, and not just looking at profit and the bottom line and what's going to line the pockets of the 1%. But I think, like, how can we elevate the world for everyone? Because that, I think, is something that's uniquely feminine. And I'm going to say feminine and masculine because there are men who hold those values too. And there are women who hold more masculine, like, let's get this done, let's drive to the profit, right? It's more about masculine and feminine energy to me. And so I think that there's a wave that's coming. And, my generation and right before is probably like at the tipping point of that. And I would say that I think that's probably why the politics are how they are right now, but let's not get into that. But
let's not go into politics. I know nothing about politics. It'll be the most boring podcast going because I just don't get it, but I need to get into it because I have a 3-year-old daughter. So in terms of how the tide is turning, I feel a little ripple. Because me and Liza, we go to the library and we make sure that we buy her books that teach her about good, strong role models. So she knows about Amelia Earhart, was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. She knows about Coco Chanel. Even Beyonce, who could be seen as a modern female success story who rises to the summit. I mean, take the butt out of the equation every time she's in a video or whatever. But it's key. And this is driven by my wife, obviously not me. I don't think I would be putting as much effort into it. It's my wife really understanding what it's like to be a woman in the world, going through all those different stages from cradle to 44, and wanting different opportunities for my daughter, so she will at some point be in the restaurant saying, no, I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to be a success, blah 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 blah. When you said about all the women getting together and the power, it reminded me of Bug's Life, the movie where the grasshoppers kept kind of like holding the ants to ransom until they were like, well, hang on a minute, if we all kind of bundle together here, we can kick the crap out of these bugs. You should check out Melanie Joy.
Okay, I will.
Melanie Joy is going to be guest on my other podcast, the Stride podcast. She's been a guest on this podcast. She has just wrote a book called Powerarchy. I've just ordered it. She's going to come on and talk about it. She talks about Powerarchy being a belief system whereby the world revolves around power systems. And one of those power systems is patriarchy over matriarchy. And how men treat women in relationships. And she believes actually that relationships is the answer. Like how we learn to communicate, how men learn to communicate with empathy and with integrity and all that kind of stuff with their women. So, where do you see communication in this? Because you said about choice. But if you're a woman in a relationship who suddenly is at the wrong end of the power dynamic, and you've got to make a choice, you've got to open your mouth and talk about it. And that is what stops most people, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's very scary. I mean, it's a risk that we have to take. And especially if you're in a relationship that isn't supportive and isn't all that you'd want it to be, it can be a threatening situation. And so I think learning how to communicate from the perspective, because the worst thing is like, you did this to me and you did that and did it. Like, I am a big fan of not acting out and not acting in, right? But really feeling what needs to be felt and then saying, I feel this and this is how it impacts me. And this is how I see our relationship engaging in this. Let's talk about it. I mean, I've really grown into the idea that we need to say what we mean and ask for what we need in all circumstances. And it's a practice and it takes time. And it also requires education for the people who are around you. Because when I started doing that, my husband and I had already been married for 9 years. And he came home, he had been in Afghanistan. And I was like, I've decided we're going to stay married, because as growing up in an alcoholic family, I was like, I don't know if we're going to stay married. Who the hell knows? Right. So he came home and I'm like, I've decided that we are probably going to stay married. So I'm willing to share myself with you. He was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, he was totally confused. Because he had no idea what I was talking about. And then we started having a real honest relationship where, and it was challenging. I mean, and my husband is a super supportive, amazing person. And he was still very challenged by me being like, I am super resentful about what's happening here and here. And this isn't about me. This is about us. What are we going to do about it? Those are hard conversations, especially as a woman, when you've taken responsibility, like, okay, well, this must be my fault and I must need to adjust myself and I have to do this and I have to do that to make this okay. Right. So effectively taking my own place as an equal in the relationship, which I didn't learn from my family. I didn't learn that from society, kind of trial and error. Like, how do I do this? Because I am an equal in this relationship, but I can see I'm not acting like one because I don't feel like I can be myself. Not because of him, because of me.
Well, as you're still married, I imagine what happened was you started to change and your husband either became slightly terrified of that or kind of turned on by that, or a mixture of both. And then,
probably both. I'm going to say both. Yeah.
And then when you started to use words like resentment and really kind of explain how you were feeling, maybe there was a slight defensiveness that was coming up. What would have happened if he wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to go there? What if he would have continued with his defenses, so you continue to not be seen and heard? Two questions. How do you break down that barrier? Knowing that you can't change him, you can only change yourself. What's your move? And when do we know that enough is enough and we have to leave a relationship?
I think that's a great question. Because I was going to say, I'm like a dog with a bone. I will stay with something and stay with it because I want to believe that it's going to work. So, I had to really okay, well, at some point, either this is going to take and we're going to be able to do this, or we're not. And fortunately, it was okay. But there was probably a good 2 to 3 year period where there was a lot more conflict in our relationship and defensiveness. And then there were those moments where he would open up. I'm really fortunate because he is a pretty open person. If he hadn't have been, because I'm trying to think, I've dated men like that. And, I think you do what you can until you're done. I mean, I don't think there's a formula. I think people have different thresholds, right? Like, some people I know are like, yeah, okay, I'll talk to him 3 times. And if I'm not getting anything, I'm done. I've been dealing with this for 10 years. Right. And so I think it's such a personal thing. I mean, but I think you have to be willing to entertain the idea, like, is your mate willing to go to therapy? Like, I mean, that would probably be the first thing I would do if my husband hadn't have been open to these conversations. I would have been like, we need to go to therapy, right? Like that would be my first step. And then if that doesn't work after giving it some time, then it's really, I think, time to consider leaving.
It's so hard, isn't it? Like I've been through a divorce where I couldn't, my gut kept telling me to leave, but I just couldn't go. I didn't dare get off the path of least resistance. Fear froze me. But I mean, my advice to people on the same point is, because I get in these debates with Liza, you know, or have done in the past, is I'll say, look, Liza, you want to be seen and you want to be heard, which means I need to behave in a different way. You're not asking me to behave in a different way. You're just telling me what you want in a relationship, right? Now, if I was telling you openly, F you, I'm not interested in change, I don't want to change,
right?
Compared to, oh, honey, wow, I didn't realize that I was kind of like just all me. I tell you what, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to become a different man because I want to be a wonderful husband to you. But then on that process, you keep screwing up all the time, but your main goal focus is that you want to be that guy. Now there's your answer. I think you give that guy some time and patience. I'm not just saying that because it's me. But the guy who does not go to therapy, the guy who has a go at you because you're drinking and won't support you, the guy who does all the wrong things, continued all the time, and just really doesn't want to change. You've got to make that tough decision, I think.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something really important there, because at the beginning, I would actually say to my husband, I'd be like, here's really what I need from you right now. Like, and I would literally give him the script. I'd be like, I really need you to listen to me. I need you to look at me. I need you to hold my hand. I need you to hug me when I start crying. Like, I would literally tell him exactly what I needed from him, which seems like really stupid. But the thing, I didn't want to just say, you're doing this wrong, because my husband's a very process-oriented person. So I knew that he was actually going to be frustrated if I just said, you're not supporting me. He'd be like, can you tell me how? Can you tell me what you need? Right?
This is so important on so many levels. Two things come up, really super important. One is when you stop drinking alcohol and our partner is still drinking, I keep banging on all the time how important it is that we get that support, but you have to tell them what that support looks like, because they won't have a clue. So for example, if you give up drinking, your partner might say to you, have a drink. And the reason they're doing that is because they think they're supporting you, because they don't want you to feel like you have a problem. They might even say to you, you don't have a problem having a drink. And you're thinking to yourself, why is he fucking telling me to drink? I don't want to drink. Why is he my enemy? He's not. He's trying to support you. So tell him how to support you, right? The other reason why what Nona just said is super, super important from my own personal perspective, and I'm pretty sure it'd be the same for a lot of men. When a woman turns around and says that it ain't working, the guy really, really, really wants to fix it very quickly, because a guy doesn't want to be wrong. A guy doesn't want to be doing something wrong, behaving in the wrong way. But guess what, folks? He very often will be clueless about what to do. So what I do in my relationship is, when Liza says that she ain't getting what she wants, I say to her, what do you want me to do? And that's not a cop out. It's not like it's just saying, look, honey, I don't know what to do right now, and I really need your help. If you can tell me what you need from me right now, I'll be able to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but that's me. There will be, I would say, 80% of men out there who will not go there because it will diminish their masculinity and take away their power and status. So please just say to them, I need you to do this for me right now. And that then, Nona, and it can be a kind of a checklist of whether or not this guy is serious, about
Absolutely. I totally agree. And, that goes back to the idea of say what you mean, ask for what you need. It's like, I I don't want to be talking to somebody who's being passive aggressive. If something I'm saying to you is not sitting right, I want you to tell me. Let's have a conversation about it. And when I'm not getting my needs met, I'm going to ask you for exactly what I need. And I want you to do the same. Like equal partnership here. Like I want the same from my husband. And that also has been an education for him. Because I think masculinity in general, I don't need to ask for anything. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm strong. So, teaching him that he too has the right, and I want him to be asking for what he needs in our relationship. It's been a really interesting journey with him around that.
I think I don't know what you think about this though, is also having a look at how your life plays out in a kind of like the minutiae of it. So what am I doing day to day? And the reason I raise that is in my previous relationship, I got into the habit of getting up in the morning, giving everyone a kiss, going to work, coming home. And I was so exhausted that I'd have my dinner and then I'd just watch TV all night. And then when my marriage started to fall apart, and then on the weekend, we just get so drunk. It was unbelievable. But then I was thinking, wow, we never talk. There's not a time in our life where we ever talk. And sometimes me and Liza can get like that as well, where we're both working so much, we're not actually talking. So we have to carve out, I know this sounds so anal, but we have to say, right, tonight between 10 and 11, we are checking in with each other. Because if we don't have that structure, we could go months without even talking to each other. Now, if that becomes a habit that leads into decades into your relationship, it's so difficult then to say, hey, I want this, and this in my relationship, because you haven't developed that skill, right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, relationships, be they with ourselves or with other people, they need our attention on a regular basis. Yeah. And so I actually make a point of, when we're getting ready for bed every night, I initiate a check-in because I work at home. So I have a more flexible schedule than my husband does, right? And he's the one who leaves. So I'm the one who kind of puts that on my checklist to, make that connection with him on a daily basis because it's important for for all those reasons you said.
Yeah, totally. It's super, super important to get that system in place where you are talking. Do you have to leave at the top of the hour?
Nope.
No. All right. As we're talking about relationships, let me ask you a random question on relationships. Okay. See where it leads us. If you had to redesign the institution of marriage, what would be the rules? You can pass.
No, I don't want to pass. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, first of all, I mean, we're just talking about minutia, right? I mean, I think some of the most destructive things that happen inside of relationships are the inequities between who's taking care of what. I don't think women should have to ask their husbands to provide childcare. It's your child. You're not a babysitter. You're the dad, right? Like, I would really design marriage so there was really truly equal partnership in taking out the garbage, doing the dishes, cooking dinner, cleaning the floors, like all of that stuff. And if there's enough money, great, we hire somebody to do it. But ultimately, it's a 50-50 proposition for what happens inside the home. Now, whether that translates to, work or not work, I would hope it would, that women would really go, woohoo, and take up the charge to go out and follow their dreams and create businesses and opportunities for themselves and other women. But I feel, and taking care of aging parents, oh my God, that would be a 50-50 proposition, that there would really truly be an equality in that because, most women who work full-time come home and then they have to do most of the parenting, most of the emotional labor, and most of the cooking and cleaning.
Yeah.
And that is a societal sort of, again, those expectations. And if that were not the case, wow, I mean, what a relief that would be, and what amazing energy that would open up for women to do more of their own work in the world.
Yeah, I remember I was watching a speaker called Eric Thomas. He's called the Hip Hop Preacher. He was in San Diego a couple of weeks ago, an influencer seminar by Brendan Burchard. And he was talking about when his wife was diagnosed with MS, and she was crying to him, and she was saying, "I can't believe I'm stuck in a wheelchair while your career is just taking off." So his career, he went from nothing to like one of the best motivational speakers in the world. And she felt really guilty and ashamed that she was in this wheelchair. And he turned around and said, "Honey, don't you remember our vows in sickness and in health?" And he said, "It will be my pleasure to push your wheelchair." And I burst out crying, because in that moment, I realized, wow, I'm not showing up with that intensity and that focus and intention with Liza. Like, I'm not. I'm so involved in my own head. Right, I got to interview Nona today, and then I got to have my therapy session with Liz, and then I got to interview Shana Wan, and then I got to go for a run, and I got to meditate. What about my wife, right? You know, and then I was like, whoa, she has dreams as well. So the time that I have that is not childcare, which is not, which is not working, we need to split this up evenly. And then I think this is an important point. If we split our time up evenly, so now I have responsibility for childcare much more than I used to in the past. Let's say an extra 4 hours a day, right? It's my responsibility to get a babysitter for those 4 hours so I can focus on my meaning and purpose. But she's freed from that burden because I'm taking it on. But what I do with that time is up to me as an individual, as an autonomous man. I need to say, I need to balance this with spending time with Zia, my daughter, but also I need to get shit done. So I'm going to hire a babysitter. Not say to my wife, which I've done in the past, if you want more time, I'm not your answer, get a babysitter, right? How unsupportive is that when you think about it? Like, it's so bad, There's my failing.
What a wonderful thing that you are thinking about that and thinking about your wife, and, really so committed that you are thinking that way.
I'm thinking about it after I screw things up. So I screw things up and then think. So I'm very good at post review. So like this morning, I upset Liza. It's like, what did I do to upset her? How could I have done it differently? What does that mean for me? What have I got to do? What have I got to work on? Right. And what I'm finding is it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort when you're my type of personality to get this right. So you need to have patience, and your partner needs to have patience as well. Now, this same guy, the hip hop preacher, he said something. He said, what did he say? He said, the wealthy do things, the poor don't. And he wasn't just talking about money. He was using it as a metaphor. And I know that you like to work with women to get them to understand this wealth within them. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think for one, the wealthy they think bigger, right? They're willing to make investments. Like when you were talking about taking on the role of watching your daughter, you were like, if I have things to do, then I need to book a babysitter during that time. Many women would never consider that. They would not consider that an investment in their own future and their own dreams and desires, right? And so from that perspective, women tend to think more along the lines of, I have to do all this. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough of anything. I just have to give and give and give and give, right? I'm always behind the 8 ball. And wealthy people, and I think truly men as well, tend to be more focused towards enterprise, thinking bigger, making investments. They're more willing to take risks with money. They're more willing to take risks with their energy and their time, more willing to fail. Those are all things that lead to success in the long run for many, many people, especially those of us who are educated and, have had opportunities. But even here in Africa, you see that if you give someone an idea to invest some money, if you give someone money to invest and say, okay, you should start a vegetable stand, or you should do this, or a garden, and it will change their life, right? They're willing to make that investment. But for whatever reason in our culture, we have gotten away from seeing it that way, especially women, I think, in many, many respects. So when I teach women to cultivate their relationship to their inner wealth, the thing is that we all have a tremendous amount of resources. It kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, right? That women are so powerful and don't even know it.
Yeah.
Don't even know it. And so a lot of that process is reconnecting women to their resources, their internal strengths, their intelligences, their values, their priorities, like you were talking about, but also like, what do I have access to? What skills do I have access to? What are my natural inclinations? And then I think one of the most important aspects of all of our wealth, no matter who you are, man, woman, child, is in fact your desires. Like, what is it that you are longing to do or create? And I say this because, I remember my husband and I having this conversation, and he was talking about this doctor that he went to who was super into his job. You've gone to doctors or you've been to professionals who you can just tell they were born to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And then you've gone to the doctor who was not born to be a doctor and probably is just doing it for the money or the status, right? You can tell the difference. And we were talking about this. I'm like, everybody should be doing that thing that lights them up like that. If everybody was doing that thing that lit them up like that, world peace. They're seriously like, and my husband was like, what? And I'm like, it's true. We turn off those innate desires and leanings when we're young or for societal reasons, but really like because we're told it won't make enough money or it's not cool enough. Like in Italy, we lived in Italy for a while, and being a barista is actually like a time-honored tradition. You have coffee shops that have been there, forever and ever and ever. And it's like his father and that father and the grandfather and everybody has been a barista. And there is such a pride and a joy because they're doing something that is like meaningful to them and that is, they enjoy. And so I went to business school. But this is a long, long story. Anyway, I went to business school because my father had said to me, please do something that you can actually make money doing. I was originally going to go to school for psychology, and my dad was like, oh, please don't do it. Go to business school. Well, I was a wreck. I hated it. I hated the people. I became a CPA. Hated it, hated every minute of it, drank my way through it. I would go to work and it was like clawing my eyes out. It was so awful. I hated it. And, and then I got married and it was like, oh, okay, great. So like it ended up being wonderful that we were going to move all over the place because then I was like, oh, now I can do something that I really want to do. And I have been far more successful coaching. And I've gone back to school to get a psychology degree. And guess what? I thought I was stupid because I didn't do very well in my undergraduate degree in business. And I didn't oh God, passing the CPA exam was like, oh my God, it was so hard. It was horrible. I hated it. I'm getting straight A's in my graduate program at Harvard. It's like, and it's fun and it's easy and I love it. And I'm like, God, when we are living into what we're really supposed to be doing, miracles happen for us, for the people around us, for the work that we're doing, Anyway, so I think that's such a key component of our wealth that gets turned off. We start believing that our desires or what we really want isn't good enough by societal standards. But really, that's the seed of our wealth.
It's like two things that come up. Thanks for sharing that story. Two things that come up there is, let me think a second. Just lost my train of thought. I do this from time to time, Nona. It will come back to me. Oh, one of them is delegation. So I wrote on my notepad as you were talking, I need to create a course on delegation because I see the women in my life so unwilling to pass on what I see as tasks that are not aligned with meaning and purpose. And we've had, we have an intensive program called the Intensive Program on Strive. And towards the end of it, we say to people, what is your meaning and purpose? What is it? Let's try and figure out what the theme of your life is. And then what are the activities that we're doing every day that add value? What are the activities that add value, but they're wasteful? So like me, it would be doing my freelance work. It adds value because it gives me money to pay the bills, but it's not aligned with my meaning and purpose. And what are just flat out wasteful, like drinking alcohol, right? So we can get to look at these things, and it could be like, well, I ain't got no time to do anything because I'm always looking after the kids. I've always got to do the washing. I've got to do all the cleaning. Okay, get a cleaner in, get a babysitter in. Now how much time do you have on your hands, right? And then financially, it's like, no, I can't afford it. How much money can you make? Like if you give yourself the space to do this, to cover those costs, right? So I think delegation and learning delegation, particularly if you're a woman, and you have this societal conditioning of doing everything for other people before you do it for yourself. I think if you've stereotyped as a housewife, so because now you think your role is to clean and to care. So if you're not doing those things, you think that you're a failure. So there was that come up for me. What was the other thing that came up for me? I can't remember. It'll come to me another time. It'll come to me. Let's not delay it. So
okay.
So you work with women to help them to discover their inner wealth and their resources and their skills, and that they're much more powerful than they think they are. But how do you do that?
Well, a lot of the time we're working with, I'm also a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. And so I really bring a lot of that philosophy in as well. I'm a big believer in practice. Like when I think about who I was when I was drinking, like, I'm like, my God, who was I? But the changing myself was a series of practices undertaken over a period of time, right? And so I truly believe that transformational change is something that happens in the day-to-day practices that we undertake on our own behalf. And so I often help women devise practices to set foundations, kind of like what you're talking about. It's like, okay, so like 2 days a week, you need to get a babysitter so you can focus on this big dream, right? And what is that going to look like? The other thing, because of the fact that I'm working with women, one of the things that I am non-negotiable with them is that there has to be some kind of practice of attunement and what some people might call self-care. It's like, that is actually non-negotiable, because if you are going to create more in your life, the first person who has to be the receiver of more is you. And so, for instance, this is often a big thing for people who are feeling scarce with money. It's like, well, what is the thing that you don't do for yourself because you need to go make money? It's like, you need to switch that, right? You need to eat the carrot. Eat the carrot first, and then that tells your entire system, I'm abundant. Look, I did the thing. I'm doing the thing. Like, I learned that when we lived in Hawaii, and I learned how to surf. And I was like, oh, I'm too busy. I can't go surfing today. And I just felt like mean and tiny. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have enough of anything. I just have to sit here and work. But on the days that I would actually and I would cry sometimes going, because it was so hard to walk away from my desk when I was feeling like scarce, I would cry. I'd be like, I can't believe how hard it is to go surf. I mean, seriously. I'd go surf, but I'd come home, and then guess what? I'd be filled with ideas, and I'd know exactly what I wanted to do, and I'd be more focused, and I'd have more energy. And all of a sudden, like, things would open up. And so those fundamental practices of setting up the abundance in yourself first, it seems so selfish, especially for women, but it is like so generative if we can give ourselves that first, and then really start saying no to the things creating and carving out that space, like you were talking about delegating, it's like, do you really need to be doing the laundry? Send it out, whatever. Like, give it up. You don't need to do it. Like, say no, create that space. So those are really fundamental, but that is like practice, right? That is a practice that, and we grow in ease, because people say, but this is uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. And I'm like, that's what coaching is all about, is learning how to be uncomfortable. It's about disrupting the status quo so you can become the person that you are meant to be.
Can you talk a little bit about scarcity versus abundance? And you can use money actually as a kind of navigating tool there, because when I grew up as a kid, I grew up in a scarcity mindset. Like, I was born in that part of the world. That's how my parents taught me. And I'm trying, as I'm evolving, to become more abundant, but I find it really difficult. So if you could talk about scarcity versus abundance, how it affects the nervous system, what's going on there, that'd be great.
Yeah. So when we talk about, especially when you're talking about scarcity from the perspective of growing up in a situation like in the United States, a lot of people of my age grew up with parents or grandparents that lived through the Depression. And so, or, you know, were in during World War II. And I'm not entirely sure where you grew up, but, you know, there's a lot of history of family stuff, like intergenerational, what I would call trauma. You know, that is actually trauma. And by trauma, I mean situations that end up happening over a period of time, or instances that the person cannot process. And they've actually shown that trauma can be passed genetically. Epigenetics is a new, and I'm sure you've maybe heard of this, but it's a new field that's really emerging, and that we can actually inherit trauma. And so what happens in the nervous system is that if we experience trauma, whether it be ours when we're growing up, and a lot of times if we grow up in a household, not only are we inheriting trauma, but there can be trauma that's happening, a lack of attachment. Like if you have parents that are working 12 hours a day and you as a child are not feeling attuned to or seen and heard as a child, that over time can actually become trauma in the body, right? And what I mean by trauma in the body is that it just amplifies our nervous system, where we're either constantly sort of in an activated state or a depressed state, right? And when we're in that state, we're not in that window of tolerance. We're not in that curious, open, focused, able to make good decisions, right? So we're constantly feeling sort of like we're about to get eaten by a tiger, even though we're not, right? And so if we're in that state all the time, that feels constantly like not enough. Even if I can look around and say, I have money in the bank, I have pillows on the bed, I have heat, I have food, I have all these things, I can see and feel and experience that there is actually enough and I'm safe, but I do not feel safe, right? That to me is the very fundamental aspect of feeling like you're in a state of scarcity. And so no amount of money, you know, certainly there's a negative amount of money that impacts that, but no amount of money is actually ever going to address that. You are never going to feel a sense of ease and abundance and enoughness if that is your set point. And so one of the things that I often talk about with women with money in particular, because most of the women who come to work with me, they are not experiencing what I would say is true scarcity. Because true scarcity, I live in Africa. I am surrounded by true scarcity. Okay? Like that's a very real thing. And actually most of the people who live in true scarcity aren't on high alert. They just know what they need to do. Yeah. You know what I mean? But in the Western world, when we are in this sort of perceived sense of scarcity, no amount of money is going to fix that. And so what has to happen is a focus on healing the nervous system. And that can lead to better decisions with money, because I think what happens when we have that sense of physical scarcity, like perceived scarcity, where our nervous system is like, I'm not safe. right? I mean, that's the fundamental statement. I'm not safe and I need more, or I need to be more, or I need to do more, or I need something else to make this okay. What we have to work on is, in fact, that sense of our physical selves being safe. And that's one of the reasons I also advise practices like those daily checking in. Am I safe? How am I? Here I am. Like, it's not difficult, like, but we do need to retrain our nervous system to look at the world and see safety instead of looking at the world and seeing danger.
It's almost like, I think of Sam Harris talking about free will and how thoughts just pop up into our head. And then Sam Harris says, think of a vegetable, and you think of a vegetable, and he's like, okay, you didn't consciously think about why you made that choice. Who made that choice, right? So it really gets me thinking, well, if we don't control what these noises that are going on in our head that's causing all this suffering and scarcity paradigm, then let's hijack that and become proactive and start creating our own internal dialogue, which is more abundant paradigm led. And I guess the way to do that, if you're not used to it, is to look at your calendar and say, from 10 o'clock till 10:30, I'm going to go and find a corner of the room. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to say these things to myself. Rather than to say, I just listened to this podcast with Nona and I'm going to develop a scarcity mindset. It won't work.
Yeah.
It won't work.
Totally.
Let me ask you a question on money. Is that all right while we're talking about money? Because I know you used to run programs on money. Do you still do that?
I actually just ran a program called Money and Trauma that was all about the relationship between money and trauma and how we can work with the nervous system to create a sense of abundance.
Are you going to be doing that again in the future?
I will run it again next year for sure.
Let me know when you run it. Okay, let's ask you a question about money here. What conflicts are created by money in your family?
Oh boy. Yeah, we used to have lots of conflicts around money. We don't really have many conflicts around money anymore. I'm going to tell you a really great story though, because it was really a pivotal moment for my husband and I with money. We moved back from Italy and he needed to buy a car. And he had mentioned it to me in passing, but we had literally just gotten to the DC area and it's expensive. And we were still, you know how when you move, you like really kind of have to get your bearings, and like, how expensive is it really to live here? And so he came home one day with a brand new Mercedes. And I was like, what just happened? Did we talk about this? Did we have a conversation about this? And that was really the beginning too of a whole different kind of relationship with us for us around money, because I had really just kind of been like, I'm not going to pay attention to this. I'm not good with money. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a CPA. Like, oh, he knows better. Da 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 da. And so that really opened up a whole new world for us with money and being on the same page. But now I tend to be more, so talking in current terms, I tend to be a lot more relaxed around money. And not that I mean, we're avid savers and we're both very committed to that. But I tend to be more like, okay, well, we have these expenses that are coming up. Like we want to travel back to the US, and I'll be like, okay, well, we'll take money out of savings. And my husband's like, no, we cannot take money out of savings. If money goes into savings, it never comes out of savings. I'm like, that's not really the point of savings. I'm like, so can we have a conversation about this? So those will definitely be interesting conversations for us around money. But those are really the biggest conflicts we have. And I wouldn't even call it a conflict anymore, because we understand each other and we can have good conversations. We have good communication now around those things. So
I think for me, in terms of money, it's a real difficult area for me and Lighter to navigate. So it's good because it forces us to work together as a team. And one of the things that I found that leads to disconnection and a partner not being seen or heard is these individual silo mentality of how a relationship works. I'll get my shit together. I'll go to work and I'll do my stuff. You look after Zia and take her to school and feed her and stuff. And then we'll have a bit of time in the night. Whereas something as simple as, Lee, let's drop Zia off to school together. And then let's just go to Starbucks. And then me and you will thrash out what we're going to do this week with our calendars and how we're going to spend time on our values. And then we can do some money stuff on how you can go to the UK and see your son, and how we can buy Halloween costumes. Now, all of a sudden, you're working together as a team. And in my experience, that lights her up.
Because well, it creates intimacy. There's an intimacy around those everyday choices and decisions that you're making as a couple instead of it being individual. So absolutely.
But I grew up thinking that intimacy was sex, that no way you could relate intimacy with just listening to someone for 10 minutes, talk about their problems and not provide an answer. Like I've been blessed to be married to a woman who does understand she's powerful and does say, hang on a minute, you're out of line. Wait there. I'm not accepting this. Like that. I think that might have happened in my first relationship, but I was using my power status to kind of dim that light. And I eventually dimmed it to the point where she turned around and said, I can't live with you. Even as much as I love you, I can't be with you anymore. So it's nice to have that. So yeah, women out there, get your power, man. You know, you've got a man in your life who will just evolve like brilliantly and become so wonderful as a result of that. Last question I'll ask you and I'll let you go. At Strive, people call me a hard taskmaster. I really believe in the power of doing the work. Like if you want to be someone who doesn't drink alcohol, you got to work, right? You know, and the ones who say, you're working me too hard and I don't want to do this, it's not going to happen, right? I read on your website that you also believe in the power of doing the work. What does the work look like in the context of how you're changing female lives out there?
Yeah, I think that if we talk about something, that's great. But what we really need to be doing is taking action and showing up every day and doing the work on behalf of who we want to be in the world and whatever that looks like, you know. And for some women that really is, I want to show up and be the best parent I can be. And for some women that's like, I want to win the Nobel Prize in math, which just happened.
Boom, boom.
First woman in history this week. So, you know, I mean, I think that the thing about personal development, and, you know, I'm part of the personal development world and so are you. But one of the things that's like, we can talk all day long about our mindset and we can talk all day long about how, you know, what our values and priorities are. But at the end of the day, what really matters is how we take action, what we're doing, right? And sometimes that's about not doing, it's about saying no to things to make room for what's really important. But when I talk about doing the work, I'm like, you need to show up first for yourself and to be really honest with yourself, and then show up for what you really, really want and believe in. You know, I like your wife, you know, I grew up in a family where I felt like the people in my life were actively trying to pull me down and put me under their feet, right? Like, no, like you're too big for your britches. Who do you think you are? All that kind of shit, right? My vision is a world where we are lifting each other up. Like I want the women that I work with, my daughter, I want the women I work with, my husband, anybody that I'm in contact with, I want you to feel like you are standing on my shoulders so you can see the event horizon for your dreams and the world that you want to live in. And that is everything to me. You know, that is absolutely everything to me, that we elevate each other.
Nona, beautiful ending. I just want to thank you for being a guest on the Alcohol Addiction podcast and just to honor you for the work that you're doing. It's something that's really dear to my heart. You know, I see my mum in a relationship with a guy who it's not his fault, but he just really doesn't know how to show love, and how that has paralyzed her for so many years. And eventually, you know, she'll leave this planet and she'll be thinking, what did I do with my life? And that really, really hurts me. So the fact that you're working with women to change that dynamic, I just want to say thank you very much and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Lee. It was such a pleasure to chat with you today.